Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our Northern Road Link live streaming session. Today, we're going to talk about the Northern Road Link draft environmental assessment terms of reference that are currently open for public review until January 8th next year, 2022. We are doing these streaming sessions to help community members and the general public better understand the purpose and contents of the draft EA tour, as we like to call it. We want our listeners and viewers to clearly understand the project itself, the EA process, and the purpose of the draft EA tour public review period so that we can get as much input as possible on this important EA work plan. With me today is guest co-host Ange Brooks. Hi, Ange. How you doing today?
I'm good, Don. Thanks. How are you?
Oh, pretty good, thanks. Ange is a senior ecologist and manager with S&C Lavalin. She's also the project manager for the Northern Road Link project, so we're talking to the right person. Ange, thanks again for joining me this week, and why don't we get things started by a bit of a project background. Let me provide a little bit of a background just so those that are sort of new to the project can get an idea of sort of where it came from. Um, The Martin Falls First Nation and Webequie First Nation are remote Indigenous communities. So they're not accessible by an all-season community road. And they are also committed to the sustainable development of their traditional territories. In 2018, Martin Falls started collecting information on the few of the past studies that had been done on a road that would connect their community with the Ring of Fire mining development area. Um, there were a few community events that were used to present this information and get feedback. And as a result of this feedback, a few alternatives were developed, and then previously developed alternatives for different initiatives were adjusted to account for community values, things that were important to community members. And all this background work continued in pieces, and then it ended up becoming the starting point for the Northern Road League project when Ontario, Martin Falls, and Webequie announced an agreement to work together in March of 2020. Um, Ange, maybe you can give a high-level overview of the project team, just to give our viewers an understanding of who's involved in this.
Sure. So, as you said, the two communities leading this project are Webequie First Nation and Martin Falls First Nation, and they are at the top of our organizational chart. Falling under them are is the what we call the Northern Road Link Working Group, and that's comprised of two members from Webequie First Nation and two community members from Martin Falls First Nation. Below that, we call the strategic level, and that's where our project co-leads fall, and that's Mike Fox and Kasim Sadiq. And they look after all of the high level things related to the project. And then falling below them in the technical category is S&C Lavalin. That's where Don and I work. And we have Dylan as a sub assisting us in the project. And below that, we have contract management looking after environmental studies, engineering, engagement consultation, etc.
Thanks for that, Ange. And maybe you can tell us a bit about the project study area, how the study area has changed, and where we stand now in terms of road corridor alternatives.
Okay, so if you're looking at the preliminary study area slide, that's slide number 6, you can see the little like worm-shaped area that we have, and this covers all of our alternative corridors. It starts so the north end of the project meets the east end of the Webequie Supply Road, and it follows south all the way down to the Martin Falls Community Access Road. And that little extra bit, the part that's on an angle at the south end, is actually a part of the Martin Falls Community Access Road that we've more or less adopted into our project. And the reason for that is because at this point we don't know which will be the preferred corridor that Martin Falls chooses. So it's just made it a lot simpler for us if we adopt that section, and then we're not relying on the MF Car project to figure out which corridor they want to go with, because it doesn't matter because we have this extra piece added on. And slide number 8 shows our corridor alternatives. So working our way from south to north, so that little light purple bit is the Martin Falls Community Access Road. And then from there, if you follow along the yellow and the pink and then the blue and the orange, that's what we're not calling it the Esker route, but that's the Esker. If you're familiar with the area, that's the that glacial feature, the high ground. And Esker is, well, it's basically a big gravel deposit left behind by glaciers, as I said. Um, at the top of that yellow section, you can see that it splits, and we have two crossings of the Attawapiskat River. We have the west crossing and the east crossing. The west crossing continues on through the muskeg terrain. It goes north for a little bit, and then it turns east and meets back up with the route that's on the Esker. And then up at the top on the north end, we have two smaller green alternatives. And the reason for that is there's a bald eagle nest that's kind of smack dab in the middle of those two in that open area. And so that's avoiding that nest because there's a requirement for that. And that's about it for the alternative corridors.
Thanks for that, Ange. It's much more helpful to be able to look at that map, and I know it does seem a bit complicated for our viewers, but once you really start looking at it, you can start to figure out, okay, so it's, I take, you can see where the different options come from anyway. Um, and the purpose of this is obviously to, having these alternatives available, to evaluate these alternatives and then come up with one, the consensus sort of preferred alternative. Now that we've talked a bit about the study area, let's start talking about the project in a little bit more detail. Um, so it is an all-season road, but it's not just a gravel road. There's more to it than that. So the road itself would range in length from, depending on which alternative is selected, 117 kilometers and 164 kilometers. And then of that, the corridor itself would be 60 meters wide. That would be the area cleared. But the whole right of way, the whole area reserved for the road and associated aspects of the road is 100 meters. Um, Now, the road itself, the physical road itself, would be 20 meters wide. It would have undivided lanes, shoulders, and ditches when and where required. Of course, a road traveling through this area will make a number of water crossings. There's a lot of there are a lot of water courses in the area, of course, and so there was one very large water crossing, and that is the one of the Attawapiskat River. There will be several smaller bridges and many culverts to cross some of those smaller water courses, and then something that's really not considered by people is that there are other I guess infrastructure required to support that road. So definitely during construction, there are temporary infrastructure components or facilities, such as work areas and areas to store supplies and materials. There's areas set aside for construction camps for the workers. There are temporary access roads to temporary um, pits and quarries, and then there are permanent ones, right? So once the road is built, it still needs a supply of gravel or other or rock or other material to maintain the road and other facilities, especially at water crossings, larger pieces of rock to protect culvert pipes and other features like that. So there's a lot more to the project than just a two-lane road. That's really my point. So um, one thing I also want to talk about a little bit is that not only are we doing an environmental assessment for this project, but we're also doing preliminary engineering for this project. And as part of that, we look at the landscape and based on many different sources of information, um, we come up with a what we call a preliminary or an early design, and this particular road will be designed to suit to withstand northern conditions, to be safe, to um, deal with the drainage issues that occur in an area like this, and it'll be designed to try to optimize how easily it can be built, constructability, to optimize cost, save money where possible, and to limit maintenance costs as well too. So um, as part of this preliminary engineering process, there's what you call preliminary design criteria that are developed in terms of like road specifications, such as the depth and the width of the road, the design speed for vehicles on the road, the sizes of culverts, and a very, very technical work that our designers spend quite a bit of time on. And then, of course, there's the engineering studies to look at the geometry of the road. So how it's aligned vertically, and sort of the slopes and the steepness of the slopes, the horizontal alignment, which would be curving of the road, and how long the straightaways are, and there's other engineering studies also to look at sources of road construction material. So in this case, it would be gravel, but also maybe larger rock like riprap that's used to protect culvert pipes or around crossing structures. So having done that, let's now talk a little bit about the where this project sits in the context of the two other all-season road projects that are occurring in the area. There are two other projects. There's the Webequie Supply Road and the Martin Falls Community Access Road. And if we can change to slide number 11, there we are. This map, I think, is a pretty effective way of describing things. You've got the Webequie Supply Road at the north, which extends from the airport at Webequie First Nation southeast to McFalds Lake in the Ring of Fire area. And then the Northern Road Link would extend south and connect with, we're not sure exactly where yet, but it would connect with the Martin Falls Community Access Road. So these are three separate projects undergoing three separate environmental assessments. They were developed for different purposes. And the other two projects are progressing along through the environmental assessment process. They're further ahead than the Northern Road Link project is. But that's where this project sits in the context of the other two projects. Next slide, please, slide 12. And this slide just talks a bit about a key component, a key activity of the environmental assessment process, and that's consultation and engagement. That's talking to community members and the general public to get that feedback on the project. And we want this to be two-way communication. So we've developed a lot of information. We've developed some different ways of communicating that information, whether it's virtually through streaming sessions or or radio shows. We do radio shows as well too. And then the standard forms of communication about project information, such as newsletters as well, website. There's a lot of different sources of information out there, and the purpose of this information is to try to encourage that sort of two-way communication and get the input from community members and the general public on at different points of the EA process, but in particular, what we're talking about today is the draft EA terms of reference. So, um, and there will be opportunities for community members to participate in this project, and maybe you can describe some of these based on slide number 16.
16. Yep.
Yes.
Capacity opportunities. Right. Okay. So, like Don said, there's going to be a number of times where you can participate in the project, and it's not just providing comments based on reading various different documents, but one of the biggest areas where you can participate is Indigenous knowledge. And there will be letters going out soon to each community, um, basically outlining the kind of information that we're looking for. And we're hoping to hear back from all the communities. We're looking for all kinds of information, whether it's, where you go fishing or where you hunt or spiritual or, your favorite berry picking locations. Any of that kind of information is important. To be wrapped into our baseline studies. Another area where there's opportunities for jobs is community consultation coordinators and as well field studies. We'll be looking for environmental monitors to come out with our field staff in the spring and summer of 2022.
Thanks for that, Ange. Let's now move to a discussion of the environmental assessment process. Can you talk about maybe the purpose of an environmental assessment, sort of at a high level, and explain
Yeah,
and maybe give us a high level, again, a high level overview of the EA process in Ontario?
sure. So, an environmental assessment is a process, and within that process, we try to identify, predict, and evaluate potential environmental effects of the project. So, for example, of this road. So, the EA document itself is a planning tool where we would identify potential effects, both positive and negative. We don't just focus on the negative. We identify mitigation measures that reduce or completely remove any of these negative effects. It helps to facilitate decision making, and it provides government and stakeholders and rights holders information so that they can consider potential environmental effects and provide comments. And this is another area where you can participate in the process. And a huge section of an EA is engagement with rights holders and stakeholders to help inform the process. And this is another area where we encourage people to participate.
Thanks for that, Ange. Maybe now let's move to the environmental assessment terms of reference process, which we're currently in right now, with the draft EA terms of reference having been
Yeah,
submitted and now being under public review. Maybe you can explain what the TOR is. We like to call it TOR, and where we
yeah.
are in that process, and some upcoming milestones.
Okay, so this is on slide 21, this nice little flow chart. So where we are right now, we have just submitted the draft terms of reference. So back in May, we submitted the notice of commencement of the terms of reference. There was opportunity for comment during that period. There's opportunity for comment, as Don mentioned a little bit earlier, up until January 8th. We're accepting comments on the draft. Once we receive those comments, we will respond to them, incorporate feedback. There'll be more engagement, more visits to communities, more of these types of live stream sessions. And then in the spring and summer, we will be ready to submit the proposed terms of reference. And at that point, we'll be submitting a notice of submission of the TOR. That'll be another point where there's opportunity to comment, to participate in the process. And then once that's submitted to the government, to the minister, we wait for the minister's decision. And There's 3 decisions that can come back. Either they accept it with changes, or they completely reject it. So we're obviously hoping for the green light on this one, but those are the 3 options.
So, Ange, this project is also subject to the federal impact assessment process, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Can
Yeah,
you
so
maybe just tell us a bit about the difference between the federal process and the provincial process?
yeah, sure. So the federal process differs a little bit from the provincial process. So, for example, in the provincial process, we just submitted the draft terms of reference, and that's basically, a simple way to describe it is that's our work plan of how we're going to conduct the environmental assessment. But in the federal process, it's a little bit turned around on its head. So we will be submitting what's called a project description, and that's basically telling the feds that this is what we want to do. We want to construct this road. These are our timelines. This is our proposed schedule. What do you think? In a simplified version. And
Yep.
then the federal government takes that, reviews it. There's a little bit of back and forth, and then they give us a document which is called the Tailored Impact Statement Guidelines, and that is pretty much their version of the terms of reference, which gives us the details on how they want us to conduct the environmental assessment. So it outlines all the details of all the various field programs that have to be conducted, everything from noise, visual, all the biology programs, all the socio-ec programs. And then when we conduct it according to their requirements. And then, of course, the rest of the process is very similar to the provincial process with a big
And Ange,
EA
we should
document at the end.
yeah, and we should point out, Ange, that there's so many different studies that are within an environmental
Yeah,
assessment, aren't there?
exactly. Yeah.
It's
So if
not
you want to
just
flip the
what
slide.
there we go. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. I'll let you talk to that.
yeah. So these are all the study plans that the federal government requires us to prepare prior to conducting any field work. And you can see Um, it includes everything that I already, noise, there's climate change, there's birds, wildlife, socioeconomic, human health, archaeology. So within each one of these study plans is a detailed program of how we plan the field program and how we're going to conduct, like come up with the potential effects and the mitigation measures. It's all wrapped into these study plans.
Okay, let's move now and into the tour a little bit more deeply. One of the key terms to understand when talking about the EA process is valued components. Can you explain this term for our viewers?
Sure. So you'll hear valued components a lot in anytime we do any of these live streams or radio shows. And in a nutshell, a valued component is an element of the environment that has either scientific, economic, social, or cultural significance, right? So if we were to go back to the study plan slide, all of those are VCs. And within each one of those, not all of them, but if we look at species at risk, that's like species at risk is an umbrella, and then the VCs within that are caribou and wolverine. And in fish and fish habitat, separate VCs are abundance, population, species at risk. We throw that one into the fish and fish habitat one. So it's just a fancy way of saying all components of the environment and things that are important to everybody, not just community members, but everybody, but especially community members, because this is within your area.
So an environmental assessment consists of a broad range of studies well beyond just a natural environment, which some people still think is what it focuses on.
Hmm. Yep. Yep. It covers
Oh,
everything. Like I said, archaeology, noise. Yeah.
Well, let's move on now. Included in the tour, Ange, as you know, is a description of the baseline studies to be conducted. Can you maybe describe what we mean by baseline studies?
Sure. So baseline studies are just a fancy way of saying, what's happening at a certain point of time when we're out doing all of our field work. um, so we started doing all of our work in 2021. We're going to continue for this upcoming year and then continue through to 2023. So we'll be gathering all that information over a period of 2 or 3 years, and we'll consolidate it, and that will become our baseline or existing environment. And then
Ange,
from
can you?
there, sure, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Ange. I was wondering, could you maybe run through some examples of the baseline studies under the different sort of disciplines?
Yeah. Okay, well, let's look at biology. So some of the baseline studies that we're looking at, and this is where these valued components come in, and you'll keep hearing this over and over again. Fish and fish habitat, wildlife habitat, birds. We've done point count surveys for birds, and we've deployed acoustic recording units for birds. Plants and vegetation. Under the physical environment umbrella, we have air quality,
That's slide
greenhouse
29,
gas.
right? Slide. Yep.
29 is physical, yes, sorry. Groundwater, surface water, geology, terrain, and soils. I don't know. I could go on. Do you want me to talk about all the other VCs?
Well, well, let's just maybe run through, like just give people a bit of a sort of sample of each one, like under socioeconomic environment, for example,
Okay.
slide of
Yeah,
31.
okay. So 31. So some of the VCs that fall under the socio umbrella include regional local economy, land use and recreation, community safety, community services.
And then
The
there's
other one
another
that
one, human health. Human health is an
human
interesting one,
health.
isn't it?
Human health is an interesting one. This is where we're going to this is another area where people can participate. Will be at some point coming and looking for samples to do the human health risk assessment. So, for example, we'd be looking for small mammals, fish, waterfowl, upland birds such as grouse, and then we just take a sample of the flesh, send it off to the lab. They analyze it for various, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. Anyway, and we get the results back, and that's how we conduct the risk assessment based on results of that lab work. And that's where we need, because we can't collect the samples ourselves, so we look to community members to help us out in that regard.
Thanks for that, Ange. I think that gives, I think, our viewers a better idea of just how broad an environmental assessment is and all the different areas it covers. And again, we encourage the viewers to jump into this document, have a look at it, and if you have questions, bring questions forward to us, comments, and we'll do our best to respond to you in a timely way. But before we go, why don't we have a quick look, Ange, at the terms of reference schedule, slide
Oh, sure.
34, if we can bring that up.
Sure. Okay, so like I
Can you?
said, back in the spring, in May, we submitted the notice of commencement of the tour. In I can't remember the exact date that November 24th, I think it was, that we submitted the
I think so.
draft
Yep.
terms of reference. So that's out for review right now. We're within the comment period and will be, like Don said, till January 8th. So we're looking for everybody to read the document, provide comments. This is where you can really participate, provide your input. It's important. And then once we receive those comments further on in the winter, we will incorporate those and provide a revised document. Also within the winter, we'll be conducting open house number 2. That's in February. Exact date to be determined, but it's coming soon. And then once we get the terms of reference revised, and then we'll be submitting a notice of proposed tour. That won't be until the spring or summer of 2022.
Thank you, Ange, and thanks for co-piloting with me on this streaming session. That wraps up today's session. We hope you found it informative and interesting, and we hope it encouraged you to provide some comments or ask some questions of us. We welcome your comments on the draft EA terms of reference. Again, the deadline is January 8th, so please get those comments in there. And because we want to make this environmental assessment as comprehensive as it needs to be in order to assess the environment in this very important project. We'll be back again early in the new year, but that doesn't mean everything's gone quiet. We have a lot of information on our project website, northernroadlink.ca, a ton of information. And in fact, we'll be posting this streaming session on there very shortly. So look to our website, look to social media for updates. And we will talk to you soon in the new year, fairly early in the new year. We don't know exactly when yet, but we wish you a great holiday season, and we will see you sometime in January. Take care, everyone.